Just to be respectful of time for people who are here, welcome everybody. Stephen Hegedus, Director of the Kaput Center, welcome to you all. I think none of you are new faces. This is the last of this academic year's Colloquium series, and it's been an exciting year. We've had I think stayed true to our mission of having a wide variety of speakers from different disciplines with some common theme around education. Welcome to people online as well. I know there are a variety of people at different places in the world who would love to tune in. If not tune in, then watch the talks afterwards. All of these talks are archived online. It's been a valuable resource, and it's great to hear that they've been a valuable resource to so many students and academics and folks around the world. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dr. Mike Goodman, who is an associate professor and chair of the Department of Public Policy here at the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth in the School of Education, Public Policy and Civic Engagement. So we round up the year with one of our own, and Mike also works with us. He's a member of the Kaput Center Executive Board as well. So it's a great honor for me to introduce Michael today, and I think he's got a very exciting talk that I'm looking forward to hear. Just a quick background for those of you who don't know Mike's field. Mike, as I mentioned, is chair of the Department of Public Policy. He directs face-to-face and fully online Masters of Public Policy. He joined the faculty in 2009 after serving for 8 years as the director of the Economic and Public Policy Research at the UMass Donahue Institute, the public service outreach and economic development arm of the 5-campus UMass system. Dr. Goodman has authored and co-authored over 24 professional publications on a wide range of public policy issues, including regional economic development, housing policy, as well as demographic and other applied social science research topics. He has supported this research by generating over $4 million in external grant and contract funding from a diverse array of public and private sources. An economic sociologist, Professor Goodman is a 3-time past president of the New England Economic Partnership, a non-profit organization made up of leading regional analysts that produce semi-annual economic forecasts for each of the 6 New England states. He currently serves as co-editor of Mass Benchmarks, the Journal of the Massachusetts Economy, published by the UMass Donahue Institute in cooperation with the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. Dr. Goodman earned his master's and PhD in sociology at Boston University. And I think just to annotate a few more, I think you've also seen Mike's wonderful work and impact already this past academic year with his students at a variety of outlets in the state. It's a point of pride, I think, for us here in the School of Education, Public Policy and Civic Engagement to see Michael's work have such an impact at the state level. So, thank you for being here. Thank you, Michael, and over to you. Oh, he's going to take he'll take questions for clarification, but wants to get through his slides and then have a more open Q&A. So for those of you who feel you've got longer questions, reserve them for the end with some reference making.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stephen, for that very kind introduction. Very proud to be here. Big fan of the Kaput Center's work and mission, and so it's a privilege to be a part of this Colloquium series. As Stephen mentioned, I'm a bit of an odd fit for this particular topic, at least at first glance. I'm an applied social scientist who spends a lot of time thinking about economic development, about social development, and over the last 15 plus years have really been doing a series of applied analyses of a variety of different institutions throughout the state, New England, and the nation. And I think the intellectual thread connecting all of those projects together really is my attempt to better understand and develop some insights into the forces that shape regional, economic, and social development. And so toward that end, I approached this particular topic of workforce policy and STEM education from the point of view of someone who's taking a look at the industrial composition of the nation and our state, the needs of some of our employers that have been driving growth for appropriately trained workers. And I've watched with some interest over the past decade or so as STEM education has become a much higher priority for various policymakers, particularly concerned about whether or not we're producing the right number or sufficient supply of STEM prepared workers for the future. A lot of that debate continues on today, but the last several years, we here in Massachusetts, across the United States, and frankly across the developed world in particular, have had our worlds turned upside down on many levels. There are a variety of very tumultuous economic events that have transpired, that have had social and political consequences, and in many ways the ground has shifted under the feet of policymakers and frankly of residents and citizens here and across the world. But from my vantage point, I haven't really seen the discourse or the narrative, the policy narrative surrounding STEM policy and workforce and education policy yet take sufficient account of some of these developments. And so from the vantage point of someone who spends a lot of his time thinking and studying the state economy, I'd like to offer my perspective on what's been happening over the last several years economically in particular, and what some of the implications those things are for policymakers. A brief note on unit of analysis. A lot of the discussion will be focused on the United States, but I think a lot of the lessons apply elsewhere, at least in general form. And even though I do spend a lot of my time thinking about what's going on in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in its regions, and in its major communities, for my point of view, Massachusetts presents us with a very rich case example of what the 21st century economy looks like. In many respects, Massachusetts is about a generation or so ahead of the rest of the country. We've gone through this great dislocation in our manufacturing sector. We've repositioned our economy in ways that economic developers and policymakers and politicians have been advocating for at a national and international level. And so in many respects, some of the experiences we've had here, I think, can shed important light on some of the issues and challenges that are going to be faced by other states in the U.S. and other communities across the world. So with that as sort of a preface, I'd like to start my remarks today by putting a lot of this discussion in the context of what's happened over the last several years economically, and what we've seen, if you'll bear with me. It is even though I'm an academic and there are some students in the room, there will be no quiz, and I will explain to you what this means. There's a series of developments that I really basically am describing here as the Great Recession and its discontents. The reference to the Great Recession is a bit of a play on words. Those of you who are somewhat historically minded can think back to the terrible economic period of global recession that's been termed the Great Depression. This experience of the recession since 2007 and the associated financial crisis has now become known widely as the Great Recession. Some people are calling it the Lesser Depression. That seems a little too passive for me, so I'm going to use the Great Recession. And really what makes it great, and not in a good way, is the scale of the economic dislocation that's been experienced in the United States and elsewhere since 2007 is pretty much off the charts. Sometimes you hear in the popular press that this is the worst experience we've had since that Great Depression, and I think that that's not an overstatement. If you take a look here, we're looking at every recession, that is, period of negative economic growth, in the post-World War II history of the United States. And this very lonely, depressing line here along the bottom is the experience we've had in this so-called Great Recession. These experiences are comparable to one another because we're looking at the share of job losses. Obviously, the population in the U.S. has changed over this period of time. But as you can see, it's been very much of a dramatic job loss. In fact, at the end of 2008, we were losing somewhere in the neighborhood of 800,000 jobs per month in the United States, which is a catastrophic level of job loss. And even though we've had, for the last couple of years at least, what can undeniably be called an economic recovery, we are expanding in every imaginable way, we're not doing it very quickly. We're very slowly recovering the jobs that we've lost. And to get back to zero, which is where we were in 2007, at current pace is going to take at least another 4 or 5 years. So to put this in even greater context, we've had some very nasty recessions since World War II in the U.S. Recall after the close of that Great War, a lot of soldiers were returning from the battles in Europe and in Asia, and they returned to find a rapidly deindustrializing war machine and no work whatsoever. We had a dramatic persistently high unemployment rate for that period of time. And a lot of those idle workers actually spent some of that idle time creating what we now